All right. 6 Paramitas, the 6 perfections, the Bodhisattva path. We had, I think, a couple of really good sessions on the first two. What were they again? Yeah, so we're going to go with generosity and ethics. And the thing that we've noted is that they're not linear, they're intertwined. That as I'm more ethical, it's much easier to be generous. I'm not. I'm thinking about how I give, how I participate in life. As I'm more generous, and it's easier to be ethical because I'm not grasping as much. And today we're going to venture into patience. I don't know, I often feel this is the master of them all. Patience. It's the antidote to anger. So it usually starts a teaching with patience is, what is beneficial about anger? Why do we get angry? And what kinds of angers, arise? And what would life be like without it? This is one of the areas that Buddhism and psychology diverge. I put that together, it should have been like that, diverge. Anger plays such a role in our cultures, and I remember being at a retreat. Alan Wallace was teaching, and it was half the room was clinicians and therapists. The other half was a lot of Buddhists. So he'd be talking, and then there'd be these debates afterwards. What about this? What about that? And anger comes up. So from psychologists, they would say, "Oh, anger is normal. It's it's very beneficial. It's a natural part of our human experience. We need to get angry sometime." Sometimes people say things like justified anger. And then the Buddhists are like, what? How's angry beneficial? How's that work? And so I get into it. But sometimes isn't very productive. And of course, like that particular one, because it wasn't on Buddhism. And sometimes a more beneficial discussion is, if we can't agree on whether it's beneficial or not, or whether it's necessary or not, I guess necessary becomes one of the things, is it necessary or not? Is that Venn diagram, is that it does happen. That's where we can agree. It does arise, right? So when it comes in, it's necessary, can be beneficial. It's unnecessary, not beneficial at all, but they overlap in this area, then it does happen. We can recognize that. And we can also recognize that there are certain things that we can do in both groups to work with anger. And so I think that's valuable, whether we think it's necessary or not. But the thing about the Buddhist view is there's a different approach when you think it's unnecessary. It can be eliminated. And as opposed to, we're human, it's part of our experience. Necessary. Can't be eliminated. There's some psychological view that it's, if we're angry people, it's just there and it's suppressed, and then it comes up. Whereas a Buddhist perspective is much more that we are a very complex arising of mental states and factors and conditions, and I can be angry in a moment, I can be sad in a moment, I can be patient in a moment, I can be nervous in a moment. And that's the factor that's arising. And that these seeds that we have that give rise to these experiences, they're interdependent. That we are not any of those things, right? They arise. And I'm not my anger. I experience anger. And if I'm not my anger, and I'm experiencing anger, that's very different than I am angry. And anger is a part of who I am. So different shifts there. So what if we were to take a thought that I'm experiencing anger and just not identify with it? I'm experiencing anger. Anger's arising. Well, you can see there might be some space there between reacting to it, being driven by it, being hooked by it, versus I am very angry. And that's the cause of my anger. So in general, most people don't like being angry. There's some people who, feel pretty good about having gotten angry, setting somebody straight, and I'm all right with that. Or I have a right to be angry, justified anger. I hope to get to that today. Maybe I'll get there, maybe I won't, but I really like that topic. Well, patience is the antidote, as taught in our Buddhist teachings. And if we start to recognize this value of working with patience, we can actually work with eliminating the seeds, the causes of anger, so it doesn't arise. So it's not just being patient when I'm angry. It's not biting my lip. It's not repressing. It's some very skillful methods of really working with the very sources of anger, cutting through the things that give rise to anger. And I think really powerful teachings. When I teach about intentions and mindfulness, and often have people, have an intention for the day. I don't know what I should be working on. My go-to is patience. I can't pretty much go wrong there. What's the benefits of being patient? There's all these benefits. There's in the Buddhist Tibetan language something like 8 specific. We have our list, 8 qualities and this that. I got a little bit of a cheat sheet. Not on that, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd know what the 8 are. But because there's kind of a list of these things. But what would it be like to be? What's the benefits of being patient? Imagine what would be the side effect or outcome of just being more patient in your life? And that's a question. And I'm including all of you online.
Probably more peaceful.
Probably be a lot more peaceful, right? Patience, you'd probably be calmer.
Less divisive.
Less what?
Divisive.
Yeah, less divisive. You don't have to jump in so much on some of those conversations.
Probably a little more room for compassion because you take the moment of patience and maybe see a different view.
So patience would provide a gap, a space, right?
Mm-hmm.
To where you could respond and maybe cultivating compassion, which would be a lot more productive maybe than anger, right? Or any other state. So patience gives a pause, whether it's compassion as a response, but an opportunity to have a skillful response, something you'll feel better about maybe than a reactive one, right? Yes? There's one from online, from Cindy. Would have fewer regrets of showing unbeneficial behavior. Ah, yeah. Having fewer regrets from our unskillful behavior. That's a real powerful one. It's one that comes up frequently.
That was definitely what I was thinking about. With my kids this morning, getting them out the door.
Yeah, right.
It's a very frustrating time. Caregiver shows up late and I have to take the dog out now.
Right.
Got a lot on my plate.
Yeah, imagine,
Patience is important.
you know, you just said a thing I think a lot of people can relate to. A lot on my plate. You know, we have a lot on our plates, don't we? And you have a little fuller plate than most, I would say. But most people have a lot on their plate these days. And just saying that feels kind of tense, doesn't it?
You can feel it in the air when you're driving right now.
Huh,
I don't know what is going on, but recently it's been pretty crazy out there going
seems
to
like
school.
that. Hmm. So imagine having, you know, a sense of peace and ease with the many things I get to do. You know, we might be able to do them more effectively, right? Without regrets.
It made me miss the commune too because so much driving is happening.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, it makes me not want to get in my car. You know, I'm like, can I just like keep everything closer so that I can walk? Start getting into the ritual of walking my kid to school instead of getting in the car or biking.
Yeah, but you live
The
too
cars
far
are
for that.
crazy.
Yeah, I did see it was kind of a really sweet thing this morning. I come over here early in the morning, I do some practice, and just walking home, and then just in the road, a family, two parents, a couple of kids, are all riding the bikes, and one kid was turned off here to go to school. They all waved, and then the rest continue on, where I'm sure they're taking the other kid to school, and their family riding their bikes to school in the morning. You know, that sounds pretty patient and sweet. Just was quite touched by that. Yeah. Kid almost ran me over, but I was patient. They turned right into where I was coming from. But so anyone else online or anything else that might be helpful around the idea of patience?
It might help you break down or readjust your expectations.
So you could bring like a more clear perspective around how the expectations are driving impatience. Yeah. Yeah. For, you know, my favorite one is always like I shouldn't be in traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we have traffic, and everybody's trying to get somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had a little talk. I was with a group earlier today, and because their assignment was practicing patience for a week, and man, she was at a grocery store. Lady in front of her was writing a check. Writing a check. Couldn't find the pen. You know, what was that number again? And she was just rah. And so, but with that view, we might sit there and think, wow, is it realistic to expect that we shouldn't have to wait in line at a grocery store? Or that some people actually pay with checks? You know, I remember when I got my first check cashing card at a grocery store, and they used to have cards on file, and I was all proud. I got my little check.
There's another one online from Michelle. Patience seems to slow things down, less hectic, kind of savory rather than a frantic and hurried.
I like that. So for those who couldn't hear it online, slows things down rather than being hectic and hurried. You can almost savor an experience. Now, if we were like that, do you think that potentially we might be more efficient in what we were doing? You know, the analogy I like to use with what she's describing, Michelle, was Michelle, is I remember back in the old days when you used to have to answer your phone. You know, it's before.
Already.
No, before that. I'm thinking answering machines, because you really needed to answer the phone because, you know, there wasn't even going to be a message. Yeah, we're dating ourselves here. But there was a time, you young folks, when We didn't have answering machines. And so like the groceries, I've got the groceries, I'm getting home, the phone's ringing. Who is it? You know, and I'm trying to get there and I've got the groceries. I'm, you know, I want to get the key in the door and then I can't get the key in the door. I can't get the key out of my pocket because I'm stressed. And then, you know, by the time, you know, I drop the keys, pick up the keys, getting in there, maybe drop a bag of groceries or not. And then, you know, the phone stops ringing. Versus of just calmly going, reach in the pocket, put the key in the door, walk in and answer the phone. Probably would have got the phone. But that hurriedness, you know, we don't do very well. So there's all these qualities to patience. What about our relationships? Think you might improve those? Yeah. What about our relationships with coworkers and the lady in front of us writing a check? Maybe the cashier who said, yeah, there's a lot of qualities around patience, our relationships, our parenting skills.
We had to go train in Denver for 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
I had to get Adam up every day by 8:30, and usually he doesn't get up until 11:30.
Oh, wow. From normally 11:30, I had to get up at 8:30.
Yeah.
That's a it's a significant shift.
And then all the people that we were working with, 5 of them were vets. And a lot of mental stuff that they were bringing in. And you just don't realize, you're like, whoa.
You mean veterans?
Yeah, veterans. Thank
Veterans.
You.
And so they're bringing a lot of their emotional.
Yeah, they bring in all this, and a lot of them are on a lot of medications. And it just was like, whoa. I'm so glad that even through Adam's injury, he never even got a, you know, head injury. Like, he never even got a concussion.
Yeah.
So he was still on there. Like, I couldn't imagine going through that. It's like some of the stories I heard, it was like, wow. It's really heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. So these some of this you're bringing up things to reflect on in terms of how to apply patience, but reflecting on the suffering others are having. Right? We don't know that someone maybe just got back from, you know, war. We don't know what hardships they had as a child. We don't know what hardships, you know, they have at home currently, right? We don't know what their worries are if they have a loved one in the hospital. They're just in line hanging us up, or, you know, somehow giving us an attitude. That's one of the reflections that comes to rise here. So I think we could all agree patience, it's got many, many qualities to it. And one that we haven't touched on, and I don't think it's so much, I think even in the Buddhist listing, but I find it valuable, is I can't learn anything without patience, right? I mean, if there's anything I really want to learn, a skill of any sort, it's going to require some patience, right? I'm not going to be good at it right away. I'm not going to know it right away. And so if I want to learn things, if I want to have skills, if I want to, you know, even learn how to ski for those people that live up here, or even anything that I want to do, patience is going to be invaluable. Be really invaluable. So these are just mundane qualities of patience, which will, you know, are not so mundane. My life improves, the quality of my relationships improves, the ability to engage in my life in ways that are more meaningful, more ethical, with less regret. There's one of the attributes I think that says you look better. Yeah. If you think about it, when you look at someone and they're patient, you know, there's a certain, yeah, you know. So could this also then help me be more ethical? Could it help me attack some of my self-grasping? Sure. This is going to be foundational of those skills. And it's going to help me with the next one, which is effort. It's going to help me with concentration. It's going to help me with wisdom. So again, this is one of those perfection that is going to be interwoven in the other perfections in the path of awakening. It's one that helps me in my very mundane life and helps me on the path to enlightenment. It is the antidote to anger. Anger is an extremely destructive force. Extremely destructive force. I mean, I think we can look at how anger's harmful pretty quick, right? I mean, certain things just in the state of our country currently. How many times, I don't even mean just politically, I just mean, you look around what happens in anger and people kill each other. We've had shootings, we have had, violence and fights, attacks. We have had people say things they regret. It's, what's it do to yourself when I'm angry? What happens when I tell someone I can't, I'll never forgive them. Never forgiven them. I'm going to hold this pain for the rest of my life. I mean, what happens here, right? This resentment, this pain that I carry. So it's afflictive to us. So it's so valuable to take a little time and coming back to the idea, anger necessary, not necessary. I was once on a interfaith panel, Findlay, Ohio. I did 2 panels there. I was always the odd one out. Great panels, really wonderful discussions, but on both topics, and one was anger. Is it anger necessary? They went all the way down the road on the last one. I go, no, it's not necessary. They got angry about that. And the audience got angry. It was pretty interesting how it is justified anger, how we can get angry, how we need anger, how anger can be this force that's positive, actually. And there's some arguments to that. And have you ever noticed in your life sometimes you got angry enough to do something that you wouldn't have done otherwise, that you've been waiting to do, that you needed to do, and you hadn't done it, but you got angry enough, you did it finally. And it's a good thing that you did, but it was the anger that motivated. So there were examples like that. They're pretty graphic. I don't want to get too into those, but one of them was even around war, that like genocide, and and you get angry enough to get up and do something about that. And when we have stopped the Holocaust, to which the response, I think I would say, is there anything that you could do out of anger that you couldn't do more productively out of compassion?
I'll notice certain words will slip out.
Uh-huh.
Maybe aren't kid appropriate, and my mom or my daughter, she'll be like, "Mom, that's why I'm saying that at school," and I'm like, something really mild, but it like comes out more when you're upset or angry or rushing. And
yeah. So when you're angry, you're not having as much control over your choices, what you're doing.
What you're saying. Yeah.
You're in a refractory period, and the anger is focusing. So even with our children, when we're angry, we're saying things that we're not going to maybe feel good about, or words that maybe,
will just come on. Oh
yeah, that may not be an appropriate vocabulary for a Dharma center. But even really violent things of, could I respond to genocide out of compassion, and would that allow me to be more effective in how we respond? Because when I'm out of compassion, I'm seeing the suffering, so I'm motivated. But I'm motivated to remove the suffering, so we do what we have to do. versus anger, which is narrows that focus, and eliminates a lot more options.
More reactive.
Yeah, much more reactive and a lot less choice, because we're narrow. So even though there could be a good result out of an anger, I would argue, and that's what I did argue there, that there'd be a much more productive response out of compassion, where I'm not seeing the person as an evil, inherently evil thing, but the act as a terrible, horrific thing, and I'm responding to the act and dealing with the individual. So being aware, and we've talked before about how we will subtly fuel anger, and I think that's an important thing, because we'll fuel anger, we'll fuel divisiveness. That was a good point you brought up. Every time I'm talking about someone in a way that divides people, spreading, talking about their reputation, something that somebody's done, that happens, and closes doors, separates us. And karmically, the more I water anger, the more, we can just do a lot of damage. We can do a lot of damage in a sentence that could just destroy a relationship.
Here's what I found.
What'd you find on anger? Oh, well. This phone keeps listening to me. That's like the third time that's happened. I'm getting a little nervous. Who's listening? So as we engage in this path, the path is always about eliminating suffering. So in essence, the path is a path of compassion, bodhicitta, and the bodhisattva path is all about great compassion. And patience is going to play into this really nicely. And there's 3 types of patience that they talk about in the text. And one of them is to not retaliate. And somebody does this or that to me, the perceived slight. And in here, the patience of not retaliating. And retaliating is different from responding, and retaliating is different from addressing an issue. Retaliate, you did this to me, and I'm going to harm you in some way. And when we get angry, that's often ill will. So ill will becomes immediately any response from ill will becomes an affliction. So it is blocking the path. Goodwill, any goodwill, and becomes a path of awakening. So if we remember this very simple dynamic, that my motivation is what's weighting the karmic imprints of the activities that I'm engaged in. If it comes out of ill will, who's going to suffer? They may, but I am planting the karmic seeds of ill will and affliction and separation of my mind. So retaliating, clearly is going to be an issue. So learning how to not retaliate, and there's they got all these techniques. They're pretty, I can't remember them all. Some are kind of funny. One's called like the nose and the hook technique. I don't know where the hook part is, but I know what the nose one is. It's kind of like if somebody says something, right, harmful to you, right? They say something harmful to you. And one of the things that you can do is, let me take away the tone. Oh, the hook is okay, I get the hook is, the trigger, that sort of their tone, the way it was presented, that added to it, right? So they looked at you kind of snarky when they said it. They had a tone when they said it. Their motive, they don't like me. That's how come they said it. Strip all those projections away. and just get to the words of what they said. And then the question is it true? And if it's not true, what do you care? And if it is true, why be upset? In other words, if it's true, it's true. Why would we be upset at something true? And here's the nose analogy. It's like they just told you you have a nose on your face. I do have a nose on my face. And everyone sees it. So what? They're telling me something is true. Why would I get angry about that? It's an interesting technique. You just cut through. It takes some practice. Because, we're hooked by how they said it. We're hooked by the motives of them saying it. They may not even mean it the way we're taking it because we're reading into all that. But one way is to strip that.
And also realizing how much pain they're in. Like that's something I realize more than anything is some of the pain that Adam goes through makes him say things too that you normally wouldn't say.
Right.
And
So
a lot of people are in pain.
So that's a different technique. So a different technique, which is understanding that the person who's done this generally is acting from their own. If it's anger or something, it's clearly pain, right? Nobody's yelling at you because they feel good, and nobody's lashing out because they feel good, right? They're suffering. So recognizing that difficulty is one of the techniques as well. And if you can get there, you cut through a lot, right? If you can get there and you go, they're suffering. And it's interesting because, like in Adam's case, in a wheelchair, I imagine a lot of people more quickly recognize, there's suffering, there's some compassion. Maybe even when he's not suffering, right? See a wheelchair and there's compassion. And he might be doing better than the guy next to him who's not in a wheelchair, who's pretty damn pissed off and going through some other trauma. But we don't give that guy any compassion, And but outward displays of whether it's a disability or a physical pain or somebody's hurt themselves, it's pretty easy.
When someone's yelling at you, it's hard to be compassionate.
It's hard to be compassionate, even if they're in a wheelchair. Yeah. Easier maybe, but still, yeah. So one of the techniques is to not retaliate, is to recognize that they are suffering. And if I can understand their suffering, then now how would I attend to someone who's in pain? I have a pretty vivid example that I've used many times in my life with a guy yelling at me. He's a school teacher. He's a school teacher in front of a bunch of students in passing period and just enraged, screaming at me. And I just saw his anger, and I just saw that. And I recognized he's suffering. So instead of saying something back, I was actually able to say, I can see you're upset and I'm sorry. Which was not what was initially going on in my head, which is like how wrong this is, how out of control you are, and all that. And then I just reckoned he yelled at me long enough that I was able to have a moment, because that wasn't what I was going to say when he started. He just kept going. So so I had a moment to reflect on, wow, you're really suffering. And then I apologized. I said, I'm sorry. And it's interesting because then he could hear me. Because I wasn't arguing with him anymore and I wasn't yelling back. I was like, I can see you're really upset and I'm sorry. And because he's blaming me for something. And then when he calmed down, I said, can we go and talk about it? I'd like to hear what I've done, which I didn't do, it turns out. And then we had a nice conversation. But it was interesting because I couldn't have the compassion right away. He just yelled long enough. So I had a moment. And I was a little bit flustered. I didn't have a response right away, so I had a moment. Likewise, I had a mother call about her son. And it was the end of the day, school day. I was taught all day, you know. And son got an F, and I answered the phone. And she just lays it into me how, how I haven't notified her, and I could have contacted her, we could have done stuff, we could have had these interventions, and her, child, and she's just young. I mean, it's the end of the day, I'm wore out. I'm having to hold the phone, a little bit. But again, she yelled long enough because I had like all my defenses. Oh, I did send this notice home, and I did this, like all the things I did do to notify her, right? And, but she yelled long enough that I realized, she really just cares about her son. She's afraid her son's going to wind up going to jail, getting kind. I worked at interstate school. It's a tough place. It's, young African-American kid. She really cares that he's not a statistic. That's what she cares about. And she yelled at me long enough to where when she was finally done, what I told her? I said, I am really sorry. You're right. I could have done more. Could have done more. I could have. That's true. Could have contacted her more. I could have tried calling more. I could have. Yeah, I did what was required, but I could have done more. It was interesting. By telling her that, we then had a conversation. Just, you're right. I could have done more. I'm really sorry. What can we do moving forward? And let her know that I cared about her kid, because that's what she needed to hear, is that I cared about him too. And so, but if we're defensive, if we're impatient, if we get rattled, if anger arises, can we have responses like that? It's pretty difficult. Very difficult. So practicing patience, a lot of what's here that they give as methods, I believe are much more effective if we practice them when we're not angry. When I'm angry, I have less, it's hard to pull them up. But if I start practicing recognizing the suffering in others when I see people upset, and they're not maybe directly at me, I start noticing that. I start to notice how I act when I'm suffering and how I'm not always appropriate. Oh, well, that's because I was fearful, I was upset. I figured maybe I wasn't able to attend to a situation. I find a lot of my stuff, actually, if it's coming up, it's some sense that I don't have what I need to be able to deal with someone or a situation, an insecurity of some sort, or a flaw or a lack of worthiness. And that's going on. So, well, maybe it's going on with everybody else. That's why they're doing that. So if we can be mindful and start to notice these things, like, so I'm about to sneeze, I think. I'm pretty sure I have, yes, just in case. That people tend to act out in unhealthy ways out of confusion, out of suffering. Well, that's going to help me. Now, does it make their behavior appropriate? No. Does it mean I don't deal with it? No. It means I'm able to deal with it more skillfully, in a more productive, compassionate way. Here's one of the really great, let me just go through the list, and then not the list of responses. So I said there's three types of patience. One is not to retaliate. And the next is to be able to endure unpleasant situations, difficult situations. It could be painful. It could just be, I don't want to be in this situation, like in a line, or having to go deal with somebody I don't want to deal with, or, we're in situations we don't want to be in. So how do we endure that? And the third one is around Dharma. Dharma practice requires quite a bit of patience. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, which often requires us to endure an uncomfortable situation, and sometimes people we don't like. And so it kind of is enveloped in that. So those are these three types, but within them, the ways of practicing can help all three forms. And one of the ones of not retaliating is recognizing the kindness they're offering you, and that's one that's pretty commonly taught. In other words, I think my practice is pretty good. I'm a pretty good practitioner. I'm a passionate guy. I'll hold the door open for people. I'll try and listen to people. I'll do that. And then someone pisses me off. Well, they just did me a great act of kindness. They let me know what I need to work on. They are pointing out, helping me illuminate my mental afflictions, my confusion, the way I still reify people, the way I still get caught up in things, my grasping. And so the kindness of our enemies, the great kindness they show us. The Dalai Lama will often say, those people are nice to you, they're not so helpful. I mean, what do they do? I mean, how are they helping you, really? Now, those people who push your buttons, now they're your friends. They're your friends, because not only are they showing you your mental afflictions, not only are they showing you that there's stuff to work on, but now they're giving you the opportunity to do Dharma practice. Now they're giving you the opportunity to cultivate the path of awakening. Now they are the cause for cultivating wisdom, compassion, patience, effort. They're actually providing you the opportunity to engage in the six perfections, which I'm probably not doing so much when it's all good. Right? When it's all good, I'm taking a hike. Right? When it's all good, I'm not thinking about those things. When I notice how frustrated I am trying to get the kids out the door, now I'm doing Dharma practice.
Sometimes I'm noticing too that if it's coming up too much or too often, there might be something needs to change to, help with it. Like sometimes I feel like people just constantly just fall in that hole, and never really climbing out of it. And so I feel like if it happens too often, it makes me look at it going, well, what's going on that I could change to help this go more smoothly in the morning? Or what can I do to, like tomorrow I'll make everybody ride bikes. I got frustrated in the car. So, and it's like, over to Soper's Park and then Ananda has middle school. It's not that far. We can do it,
Yeah.
So just like also realizing where you could kind of make a change.
Yeah, so people tend to improve their situations or grow in some way, as a result of some pain, difficulties. And we don't tend to work on that when it's not there. My loving kindness practice, I'm good at it, except for the guy that pisses me off. I'm not so good at it. So this is a really incredible method, is starting to recognize the opportunity it's given us to grow. Another one that I think is really valuable, I'm just going with these sort of key foundational ones. If I give a whole list of all these techniques, barely anybody remembers a whole list, but I think there's some that are very functional, like recognizing the suffering, like noting that they're my kind friend. And I often will tell the story when you complain to a lama and they tell you, so you're getting upset at the cause for your enlightenment, right? It's irritating when they do that. Yes, I'm very upset at the cause for my enlightenment. But I'll tell you what, if you just remember that line, that's a helpful line. They're the cause for my enlightenment. They're helping me work on my condition. Wow, and they're suffering. I mean, those are things we can bring to mind. Dependent arising. So I'm anger. Where's the seeds of anger? Here, not there. That's a really good practice, is to start to notice that the seeds of anger are here, not there. The conditions giving rise are out there that are triggering my anger, but I'm the one who created the seeds, and I created the seeds through a lot of habits, a lot of conditionings, a lot of self-cherishing attitude, a lot of perspective, as though I know how the world should be, right? I mean, we get pretty upset when people do things that aren't the way I think they should do things, you know, and so it's in dependence upon the way I've been raised. It's in dependence upon the experience I have. It's in dependence upon whether I got enough sleep last night. It's in dependence upon, you know, what I was bringing to mind that's giving rise to my anger with the event and the person I'm talking to or the situation that arises. And it's not even one thing. And if any of those things change, it's not there. And noticing dependent arising is to start to become much more aware of the fluidity of our experiences. Can I be angry at 1 p.m. and not angry at 1:15 p.m.? Oh, yeah. Matter of fact, I can be angry at 1 p.m. and not be angry at 1:01 because I got some different news, right? Or I can realize I was angry in a misperceiving way and think, oh, I don't have to pay that bill? Not so angry. Like, this is a very fluid thing, and if we start noticing that when we're not angry, we start noticing when small agitation arises, when little frustrations or tension in our body. Well, if we start noticing that, then being aware of this dependent arising, well, this is dependent upon a lot of times what I'm attending to this specific event in an isolated way instead of a much bigger way of this journey in life, and the things that are arising, that they're temporary and permanent and dependent upon a multitude of causes and conditions. Any of those factors change, it's different, including how I'm looking at it, right? Including how I'm looking at it. So if I start to notice that when I'm not angry, just with little frustrations, I can actually start noticing that when I'm joyful even. I can also look at how many causes for this joyful thing. And it'll fade, it'll come, it'll go. So these are ways that we can, I think, work on patience that are going to provide us the opportunity to not retaliate, to endure situations, because the situations arise that we don't like, often we think it shouldn't happen. I find that a fascinating concept, that I actually know what should and shouldn't happen. Because that would imply that I am the creator and all-knowing being of this universe about what should and shouldn't happen. And yet I don't even know that when this happens, all the causes that gave rise to that event or how it affected me and what may be the continuum of an outcome of a situation, of something that happened today that might be creating a cause for me to meet or talk to someone tomorrow, or a phone call later, or a new job, or a different, whatever. And all the causes that gave rise to those people in those situations, as though I actually know how that works. I've had many situations in my life where, out of a tragic event with someone that even turned out poorly, many years later, we were brought together in a way that was really helpful in meaningful ways from people I would have never expected. And I don't even know who's going to call me tomorrow. Right? I can forget all that because this freaking thing happened. And if this happened, it's always going to be like that. And yet it happens and it's not always like that. And the way I used to think 10 years ago is not the way I think today. Dependent arising is something that I think can really help us cut through a lot of misperceptions and help us really cultivate patience. Just understand that there's a lot of cause and conditions. I don't know if I would have got in traffic 5 minutes earlier if I'd have been in an accident or not, or a rock that would have come down or not. I don't know if they weren't doing that. Somebody told me they're like stuck. They're going to, I think it was near Vale or something. You know, went down to one lane for like, it was an extra hour or something in line for a bunch of cones and nobody was doing work. Yeah, he was frustrated. So I go, man, look at those people. They put those cones, they're wasting all their time. And, you know, but don't really know why the cones were there, what work was being done or what. But we can get all worked up. Who's suffering? And I'm still in my car. So this is one of the other techniques. The Dalai Lama, Tuten Chodron always, she thinks he laughs when he tells this one. And it's just a pretty straightforward thing. Is there something you can do about it? If the answer is yes, no worries. Do something about it. Is there something you can do about it? The answer is no. No worries. Then why get angry? Who's suffering? And then he laughs. Dalai Lama. But it's pretty insane, right? I can't do anything about it, so I'm angry. Like, move on. Can do something about it? Do something about it. Can't. Why am I holding on angry? And then, you know what I'll do? I'll go tell somebody, you know, they had this road traffic and they went down to one lane and blah, 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 right? Now I'm angry and now it's there. And then we talked about, man, all those people and all that road work and how useless they are and how they rank. Man, I've heard that on I-70. So what happens when I'm driving and I see road work? Yeah, look at those freaking people, man. What happens if I'm driving through and there's no road work? Do I sit there and go, how grateful I am there's no road work?
And how nice they are afterwards.
Yeah. And the fact I have roads that are safe, that are paved, and that the sides of the mountains have been cleared. And do I drive along just really grateful for no road work? No, I'm oblivious to it until there's road work. And then I don't think there should be road work, but I want roads, but I don't want the road work because it's inconvenient to me. Self-cherishing, once again. Where's the cause of my suffering? So if we, you know, so patience, this idea of patience is not just biting the lip. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about biting the lip. We're not talking about grinning and bearing it. That is trying to not react to anger. We're talking about working with patience in a way that's going to help eliminate the causes of anger. And if we do that when we're not angry, we'll have the skill set when we do get angry to utilize it. Like, you know, for example, having someone yell at me long enough to have a healthier response. That's not a skill set I would have had prior to training with my teacher, you know. I just still waited, you know, and unloaded, you know, or defended myself. So it was a skill set that, even though it wasn't very well developed, it was at least enough on those situations. So the idea then is that when I'm not caught up in anger, I can be working on patience. So here, when we're talking about cultivating the perfection of patience, they're not telling you to not get angry. What they're doing is giving you the bodhisattva path of how to develop patience, which will eliminate much of the anger that arises and give you the tools to work with it when it does instead of suppress it. Like I can start opening up. It's not real. It's not solid. It's not, I am anger. So I think that approach to cultivating patience is just incredibly skillful, but one that if we're not actively doing, it's a bit elusive, right? It's a bit elusive. You're practicing on a daily basis in that sense, right? Thinking about suffering and how they're suffering and what's going on. And we can be doing that because also there's a lot going on. But what about when there's not a lot going on? What about, my day-to-day? Can I notice dependent arising? Can I notice how people say and do things out of their own confusion and their own suffering? Can I start to notice how when I do get frustrated, I'm having an opportunity to practice Dharma? Those are, I think, really wonderful skills that we can be developing all the time. Let me see if there's another good fundamental one here. There's some here that are pretty funky. Yeah.
Can you say more about suppressing anger versus working with it?
Yeah.
And patience, that seems kind of tricky.
Right. So the difference between just suppressing anger and working with it. If we take some time, like now we're talking about interdependence, we're talking about knowing the cause of my anger and starting to notice how things arise in dependence upon the events and circumstances, and that I often will create mental habits that create seeds of anger. That's a very different perspective that allows me when I get angry. Yeah. So initially, when I get angry or I'm triggered, right? I'm triggered. At that point, it's often to try to do no harm, right? But trying to do no harm versus suppressing anger is a little subtly different there. Because the motivation's different. The motivation is, I really don't want to do harm. I'm feeling this. I can't do anything right now except take a walk, right? I can't do anything now except try to breathe naturally, which isn't happening very well. And so that motivation is pretty different. It's not retaliatory, and it's not. So there's a sense of my body, my mind, my mouth wants to do something, and I'm not doing that. I'm not giving into that. But the motivation being an understanding that that's rooted in creating more suffering for myself and others, and understanding I'm experiencing anger and I'm not angry. That's the shift there. As opposed to, I am angry and I need to stuff it, versus anger is arising and I'm experiencing it. And I don't want to act out in a way that's going to be harmful. And I'm aware that it's temporary. I'm aware that it's going to come and go. I'm aware that it's how I'm feeling in a moment. And I can, if I work on that when I'm not angry, that's accessible much more often when I am angry. There's a different view, again, going more Western psychologic, is that, anger is just part of who I am. And I need to keep that at bay. Versus, some people say I have anger issues, right? People will say, I have a daughter who works with court-mandated men with anger, and she runs groups, get them in touch with their feelings. And she used to be a bartender. She's pretty good at it. But she's a counselor now, and she runs these groups. And so people will identify with, I have anger issues. And that's a very different viewpoint than, human being, and anger pops up, right? Anger, habitual anger and habits and patterns pop up. It's a very different way of being. Here's this anger I have to deal with. I'm an angry person. Well, how about when you're not angry? Well, it's not arising. So I'm not angry a lot of the time. And then I am angry some of the time. Am I an angry person? Or am I a human being where anger arises? And out of my suffering, and of course, most of these guys have other undercurrent, usually trauma issues and other things that have gone on in their life that have created, habits of coping that give rise to reifying situation events, talking to people and reifying my anger and all that, and put in those situations where I keep re-triggering my anger more frequently. And in a Western psychological model, I'm just an angry person instead of I'm someone who has got some undercurrent fears and insecurities and poor coping skills. And often out of those habits, my anger arises. So suppressing is just this sort of, that's really who I am. It's part of my thing. I need to suck it up, need to get through it. Versus, I really don't want to hurt anyone. I'm experiencing some anger right now, and it's not the time. And so right now I can't do or say anything, but I can take a walk. I can take a breath. And even if I do, believe it or not, as a human, we may act on anger. It's hard to imagine, I know. To not compound that by getting then angry with ourselves, and just going, oh, unskillful experience, born of suffering and confusion. And how about I take a look at what are the causes giving rise to that anger? So if we're always working more at that layer of what are the causes, the seeds, the habits, changing the conditions, the environment, then we're working with the foundational sort of underlying conditions and causes that give rise to it. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, Courtney.
I wonder a little bit about, well, I wonder a lot about the regret part and how you work with the fact that you have hurt people and
I didn't hear that second.
the fact that you have hurt people with anger.
Okay, regret, like personal regret, like that we have and how we've harmed people or done things. Yeah, I've never experienced it like that. It's kind of a foreign concept. Shame, I'm a bad person. Yeah, I've done harmful things. And I've done many. One of the most valuable ways that I work with and teach, because I work in the treatment field with a lot of people who've done a lot of harm. Shame's just current, undercurrent, is to look back at these events, something I've done, and we talk about forgiveness. So what's forgiveness? Forgiveness, when I'm forgiving someone else, like, that resentment I carry because I'm not going to forgive them. When I forgive someone, they do not magically get better. Their life, I don't sprinkle pixie dust. And I forgive you. And, they ride off on a unicorn. When I forgive someone, essentially what I'm doing is giving myself permission to stop suffering. I'm saying I'm not going to carry this pain around anymore. Right? See, we never did get to justified anger. But it plays into this. What about justified anger? And I'll say that, well, there's nothing that can justify me creating pain in my own life. There's nothing you can do that would justify me carrying pain in my life. I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? So forgiveness then, and I have this with others, and I'm giving myself this opportunity to stop suffering. Forgiveness for self is a little more elusive, right? I can kind of get that with someone else, but for me, I've done these things. How do I get past that? How do I recognize and forgive myself? And so there's a couple of things I'm going to go to one of them right now because I think it's the most meaningful. And that is that the event that happened, I'm going to go to two things. Okay. One, in order to have regret, there's an idea that I could have done better. Okay, is that true? Okay, but then is the statement true? Could you have done better? I don't think that that's a true statement. I don't think I've ever met another human being who at any particular moment in their life decided that they were going to do something that they would regret and suffer over. I just don't think that's the way the world works. I think that in the events of my life where I've harmed people, where I have done damage, where I have done things that I have felt incredible shame about, at that moment in time, that was the best I had. That was the best I had at that moment. If I could have done better, I would have. I wasn't waking up trying to screw up my life or harm, do all this damage. At that moment, based on my own experiences, my fears, my insecurities, the environment I was raised in, my addiction, whatever was going on, at that moment, that was the best I had. And so if I can get to a very understanding that now I can do better now, right? But at that moment, that was the best I had. So if I can cut through the delusion that I could have done better, I think that's empowering because it's true. But now, recognizing that event could be a tragic event, or that event can now be the cause for me being a better human being today. It's no longer a tragic event. It is now an opportunity to make changes, to develop myself in a way that the world's a lot better. So I'll just be real candid. And yeah, I'm a recovering addict. I've harmed a lot of people. I'm in recovery today. And in recovery over 35 years now, I've helped a lot of people. And I used to harm a lot of people. And would I be here today if this hadn't happened? Or these events gave rise to me finding recovery, working on myself, and being of service for 3 decades. Maybe the world's a little better off because of that, right? It's an interdependent experience that we're having, dependent arising. And so one of the ways I would teach people to work with regret around that is to transform the tragic event into the cause. The way I can make amends is to be a better person today. That's the way we make amends. And that can be the real opportunity, the conditions that give rise to a much greater wisdom.
With my kids too, I find it really helpful to go back to them and say, I'm really sorry, Mommy didn't handle that quite well or as graceful as we would like to handle it. Let's work on it tomorrow. I'm sorry. Like even just admitting that you might have made a mistake or you handled it a certain way, whoever you encountered.
Right. Well, making it right. So making it amends,
Yeah.
apologizing, letting them know you care.
Right.
But more, which shows what a good example as a human being, but also the dedicated change in behavior, right, that I'm working on, right? And so we make the amends, but we also make the living amends that I'm working on not doing that. They're really valuable. Is that helpful back there? Okay. I think there was one question online.
No, that was actually for me.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
All right. Okay. We may pick this up. But I just thought patience would just be 10 minutes. What are you gonna do? I'm glad you had a lot of patience with me. It took a while.
I want to hear about justified anger for sure.
Yeah. Someone asked me, I gave this whole talk. It was at a Buddhist center, San Diego. Justifiable anger. Because a lot of people get into that. That's their whole thing. Yeah. What can justify me harming myself? Not sure that makes sense. Yeah. All right.
There is a raised hand online
Okay, raise hand online.
from
Good thing we were patient.
here in Now Center. Hold on, let me see.
Uh-oh. If it's Dusty, we're in for it. I'm not sure you can be that patient. Hello.
This is Jessica. Jessica creating the cause for patience tonight.
Hey, Jessica. Well, we got all day for you.
I just had a quick thought that fear often is the root behind anger for me, and that compassionate action often takes courage, and how I can cultivate that more in my life.
Right. So that sounds like a statement.
Well, I'm asking how I can cultivate the courage more in my life, and if that relates to patience in Buddhism.
Yeah, so fearlessness. Fearlessness is not the absence of fear. It's acknowledging the fear and not succumbing to it. So if we go, a lot of people say things like, out of, I'm either acting out of love or fear, right? That's a common sort of thing that people say. What's below either, fear is also confusion, right? And it's a misperception of myself and the situation that's giving rise. One of the acronyms that I like for fear a lot is false evidence appearing real. But that's not always the case, because sometimes fear, unlike anger, is appropriate, helpful. I would say fear can be very helpful. And so, for example, if you're on the very edge of a cliff and you have to walk along it, an amount of fear is going to keep you very focused on where you're taking steps. Walking, I leave the house pretty early in the morning. It's dark. And, I'm going to look around for a bear, and I'm going to look around for a mountain lion. I'm not going to obsess on it, but I'm going to be aware that it's really early in the morning. It's dark. We live in the mountains. It's not going to prevent me from walking to work, but there's a bit of awareness that I have that, just be alert to a situation. If I'm in the city, in a dangerous neighborhood, there's a certain amount of fear. I'm more alert. So that those types of things, some sense fear can be okay. Getting back to your idea is that sometimes out of fear arises, anger in some other situations. So fearlessness then becomes not the absence of fear, but the ability to recognize it and not succumb to it. Not succumb to it is going to require some patience, but it's also the type of patience, the type of tools that we can work on is understanding the nature of this dependent arising that we've talked about, right? That this is an experience I'm having, and it's one of many I'll have in my lifetimes. And having patience with the experience of it. So is it true? Is your fear based in something true or not? Right? And that's where fearlessness comes in. A lot of times our fear is based on something that is not true. For example, fear that something should be this way or that way. Because something could go either way, and it won't necessarily have the impact we think. And so when fear arises, then can we examine true, not true? And then the patience, the endurance, I'm going to use a different word for patience. It's called fortitude. The ability to endure, right? To not succumb to an uncomfortable event or situation, which fear can be. And for example, speaking publicly. It's one of the biggest fears people have in our culture. And fear about how things may or may not turn out, and to learn to be patient with that feeling. And then here's where patience would apply to that, is to develop the patience of being okay with the sensations that are rising in the body around fear, and then noticing that fear won't last if I don't feed it. Right? Because that's how we trigger an emotion. So any emotion, fear, all those types of emotions, happiness, anger. I won't go through the whole list. I was about to. I'm going to calm down. None of them last. And actually, they're very brief unless we feed them. So we trigger them. We re-trigger them. There's 9 ways to trigger an emotion. Talk about it. Think about it. We can have certain smells even trigger an emotion, past experience. So then with the idea of fearlessness is noticing that I'm in fear. Is it true, not true? If it's not really true, or if there's nothing I can do about it, then can I develop some experience of patience to feel the sensations and know that they're temporary. And the way to practice that is the same way that we've been talking about. When I'm not in fear, practice this. How many worries have popped up in my mind? And I'm here, and it's Wednesday, and I'm okay. My kids are okay. Things are all right. I have a roof over my head. Got food. Where's my problem? Right? What am I fearing? So if I can start to notice that in my daily experience, when worry or small fears arise, can I apply just some patience with the experience of it, if it's not true. If it is true, do something about it, right? And see if I can work with the patience around, if I can't do anything about it, and maybe it's not true, to just allow the experience of being uncomfortable with that come and go. And that's an incredible practice, because it will come and go. We've all been afraid, and then we've been not afraid. We've been happy, and then we've been not happy. And these are experiences that are, again, dependently arising based on a multitude of causes and conditions, including what I'm attending to. There's more things, and I guess we'll go to those next week, of how to view the experience that we're happening that develops that. And one that I go to all the time, which we'll wrap on, is that there's no event in this rare and precious human rebirth that I am currently having. There's nothing that is ever happening in any moment, at any time, that is not an opportunity for me to cultivate the path of awakening. There's nothing ever that I'm experiencing that is not an opportunity to cultivate merit and wisdom and make the highest use of the potentials of this lifetime. Period. That's my go-to. Even my fear gives me the opportunity to improve. So that's kind of a note to wrap on. I hope that's helpful, Jessica. I was afraid that you were going to let Dusty talk, so. That's her husband, Dusty. He's one of my good friends. I love you, Dusty. So,
Yeah, I love you, John.
yeah, a little humor, So let's dedicate. It's been really meaningful. So I think we'll pick up. There's apparently a little more on this that we can get to. And you know, I wasn't very prepared for tonight. I was afraid I didn't have much to share. So I even brought notes. Thanks for being patient. So let us dedicate the merit and the wisdom that we've accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes. Let us dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering, find their liberation. May we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes to purify our own minds, to help us cultivate these 6 perfections, the path of a bodhisattva, to give us the strength to practice patience, to develop this patience in our daily lives, to become fearless, and to make the highest use of our lives so we can recognize our true Buddha nature and be a benefit to all sentient beings. And may we also dedicate the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes for the long life of all the spiritual teachers of all spiritual traditions that are authentically teaching the path of no more suffering for the benefit of all sentient beings. May their teachings flourish. May their students put those teachings to practice until we're all free of suffering.